let's start recording this. Only 8 minutes late. I've already given away all the secrets of interactive storytelling, but they weren't recorded, so watchers of this video will never know. Too bad for you. Anyway, the question here concerns the relationship between personality models and verbs. And there's actually a priority sequence you have to go through in making these decisions. The very first thing you have to do is think about what kinds of events you want to take place in the story world. If it's a barroom brawl, then obviously you want to have, you know, people fighting and hitting each other over the head with chairs and throwing bottles and then shooting each other, and, you know, everyone hiding behind tables shooting and so forth. This is what a barroom brawl is all about. So that's the kind of stuff you want to happen. With a different type of story world, there will be different types of events that you want to happen. But the very first thing you do in designing a story world is say, all right, for this particular story world, what am I aiming at? What are the most dramatic situations that I would want to develop? You know, what makes this interesting and exciting? Well, okay, for the barroom brawl, it's going to be the big fight. Okay, from there, the next step is to determine the verbs that will be used. Remember, Crawford's first law of software design: what does the user do? What are the verbs? You write your verb list. So you write down a list of all the verbs that you want, that should be possible, that in a good rendering of the story world, if a player goes through it and it really goes well, then these verbs will be activated. They will become events. Okay, good. So you've got your verb list now. In the case of the barroom brawl, it's going to be things like people insulting each other and the hitting, various kinds of hitting and shooting and so forth. Okay, so now you've got your verb list. Now you create the personality model. That comes after the verb list. And you ask yourself, for these verbs to happen, if one character is considering, maybe I should break a chair over his head, what personality attributes will factor into that decision? And so you wouldn't want to have personality attributes for sex, because there's no sex in these. You wouldn't want to have them for greediness, because this isn't about acquiring things. You'd want things like temper, how nice a person is, bad, good, how much people like or dislike each other. So you know, he's going to be likely to be violent with somebody he dislikes. And then you might want to have these physical attributes. I'm a little nervous about these, but you might want to have something about a big, strong guy versus a little wimp, or a guy who's a fast draw shooter versus a guy who couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. So yeah, Max?
So does it mean that once you've decided a list of verbs you want to use on your story world, you can, and then you create your personality model, does it mean that you can use those verbs with the personality model on different games, like on different story worlds?
Oh yeah, you can always, yeah, you will end up.
That's actually very interesting, because that means that we can make kind of like a library of verbs and personality models and use them on different games. So it's like, in my opinion, it's like, it means that you can build a story world around like a lot of possibilities, because if you can reuse them in other games, then it makes sense to make maybe some kind of library or something like that?
Well, I've given a lot of thought to this. In general, I feel that it's unlikely because every decision that a character makes involves so many other factors. And so you don't get high modularity. Modularity is what you want if you want to have a library. You want to have something that anything can plug into. Well, the problem is in the barroom brawl story world, you might want to make the decision of, if a guy's going to throw a chair at somebody else, you might want to base it on how big and strong he is and how bad good he is. Meanwhile, in another story world, though, you might want a different yeah, the big and strong is important, but you might want to have another factor brought in. For example, this isn't in a bar room, I'm at home, and this is my chair that I'm going to break. So maybe I wouldn't want to do it. This is the difficulty. What we found is that exporting verbs normally doesn't work very well. About the only thing that seems to be you can pass from one story world to the next is a personality model, but even then it's only partial. You can, what I found is that the 3 traits I use in my standard model, those are pretty well universal and they will work in most cases, but almost every story world is going to need some sort of modification on those. So, or maybe an additional trait or 2. So it's difficult. I don't think we can build libraries yet. It may be that we simply need to come up with an even more complicated technology. So let me finish addressing your first question. Let's see. So yes, the personality model will depend upon the verbs you're going to use. And yes, you want your personality model to be able to address every one of the verbs you choose. For example, if you're gonna have a barroom brawl where at some point somebody decides that they, wanna fall in love with the girl standing in the corner, well, you're going to need a new personality attribute for that. And things are going to start getting really hairy. That's a bad kind of thing to do because you want a story to be focused. You want to have it address a particular type of dramatic situation. You don't want to get too much stuff thrown in there. That just makes it too complicated. Okay, now I've got, let's see, Scott. In the Black Bart Challenge, I couldn't help not wanting some random heroic mechanism that would allow for the wimpy kid to overcome his settings and be the hero, or the random poker player or the barmaid. Yeah, interesting point. Because yes, an awful lot of stories, David and Goliath type stories involve David doing some sort of special trick that allows him to, defeat the expectations. And in fact, it is overcoming the expectations that makes the story interesting. The problem with those is that those approaches is that they don't have any real dramatic logic to them. That is, here's David approaching Goliath, and Goliath has this huge club or whatever. I'm gonna bash you down, kid. Ah. And then David, pulls out his magic sling, and bang, down goes Goliath. The problem is, if you're David, and you're given 2 options. 1, stand there and get bashed down, or 2, use your sling and kill Goliath. there's not much drama there. That's the problem with the magic, the clever trick, which is very common in stories, but I don't think we can do that in interactive storytelling. I think we have to force the player to actually go through some sort of complex dramatic sequence that can ultimately lead to a resolution. Here's another way of putting it. Imagine a game, for that matter, where standard shoot 'em up. You're going around shooting monsters, but you also have the super duper monster killer gun that is guaranteed to kill every monster you encounter, and you never run out of ammo. Well, there isn't a game there, is there? You just go around, bang, 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 bang. Everybody's dead. I win. Hooray. What makes the game interesting is the fact that you don't have any easy choices. You got a whole bunch of difficult, well, this gun will probably work on him, but I only have so much ammo. That gun won't work well, but if I get in enough shots, I might be able to get him. You have to make decisions. And stories can do that, or it can pull that stunt all the time, but we can't do that. So sorry about that, but
I guess I was kind of thinking that in a lot of the stories and stuff, a lot of characters are going to follow those preset traits, but maybe there's that one little kind of hidden trait where, they perform perfectly in all these situations, but there's that one weakness or that one trigger that's kind of secret or hidden, like, oh, you called my mom a name, or I don't know. I guess that'd be hard to randomize or make sense.
well, it's easier for me to address the difficulties with that approach. That tends to make it a bit more of a puzzle, in that you stumble upon the right, just by accident, you discover, hey, gosh, if you read a book to him, he falls asleep, and haha, you win. That's more puzzle-like. And I've always been, in this I am non-traditional or unconventional, in that I've always felt that puzzles are bad things. Having to accidentally discover the sneaky solution I've always felt it lends an element of arbitrariness to the thing. You should be able to intuit your way through. That's the good thing about storytelling. We bring this huge mass of intuitions about social behavior, which we can't really do that in games. In games, it all depends on the fact that the purple monster is easier to kill with fire than with a sword, whereas the pink monster, you want to use the sword, not the fire. You can't bring any intuition to that. But the nice thing about interactive storytelling is that human behavior is so complex, but at the same time is amenable to intuition. That is, you can say, this guy, he just seems really edgy to me. I better be careful, because I'll bet if I do something wrong, he's going to have a temper tantrum. That's the kind of thing and that's one of the great things about interactive storytelling. That's our advantage over games. You can apply intuition, but in order to do that, there has to be a certain predictability, and that means that the odd little nuance that is not, that you wouldn't expect can be risky. If you do it well, I think it can be pulled off, but you'd have to really do that one carefully. That's all too easily becomes just a simple guessing game. So let me get back to Max's second emailed question. If a game made with your engine is a succession of events and character decisions, how do you decide when to end the game? And also, if the data used by the game to tell the story is not pre-written, how do you make sure your story delivers an ending that makes sense and is meaningful? Like the example you used a few courses ago when you said that, talked about a knight riding a horse and falling into a pit, and that's not a story. I have a standard answer to that, which is that interactivity does not guarantee success. For example, Microsoft Word as a word processor gives you enormous freedom to write anything you want. And if you want to write total crap that makes no sense whatsoever, that's not Bill Gates' fault. Freedom implies responsibility. And so if we're going to give the player the freedom to make his own choices, we are inevitably, necessarily giving him the freedom to fail, to end up with a stupid result. You know, you're dead. You know, the girl married the other guy and rejected you. That's what freedom is all about. So no, we can't guarantee a good ending. In fact, the fact that you can fail is part of the appeal. That's what makes the success worthwhile. Remember, the shadow reveals the light. And so failure is what makes victory meaningful. Nevertheless, there's still a point you've raised there. How do you make it end? That is, barroom brawl. Are they just going to keep hitting each other and throwing bottles and chairs, and then the sticks left over from the chairs? And you know, what brings this to an end? You have to have a system built into your story world that will terminate it. That is, and there are a lot of ways to terminate it. One is to have a terminating events. For example, in the barroom brawl scenario, you could easily say, all right, they start off insulting each other, and then they start throwing bottles, and then they escalate up to throwing chairs at each other, and then finally they start pulling out guns and shooting, and when they're all dead, the story is over. You know, that's one easy way to end it. Or when most of them are dead, the story is over. An easier way to do it is to have some numerical measure of measure that you use to terminate the thing. When you know, the anger level, you add up how angry all the characters are, and when it reaches a certain level, you just say, all right, everybody is furiously angry and they all kill each other, the end. So a variable that climbs up to a certain point, let's see. So, but normally it's an event that will trigger the ending. And you can have success events and failure events. You know, you're dead, game over. Or, you know, you get the treasure, kill the dragon, win the princess, and live happily ever after, the end. So that is one way to do it. Another way is to have fate intervene with trigger events. For example, in the Arthurian story world I'm building, Le Mort d'Arthur, basically it continues with all this social interaction, and Arthur has to make judgments and lead people and so forth, and it just rumbles along for a while, and then at a certain point, fate decides, okay, it's time to bring this story to an end. And so fate has Mordred, Arthur's son, declare a revolt and then that's going to cause people to choose up sides, and there will be a big battle in which one of the either Arthur or Mordred dies. The end. So that's a way to force a story to end. So let's see. Okay, let me catch up on some of these. Let's see. Yvonne, I don't understand your statement about you got me to count me in.
Okay, yeah, it was just a comment on the proposal of making exercises.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Just that.
Let's see. And then we have Max again. So I have another question now. If we build our story world to handle a good amount of verbs, right? Now an NPC will choose one of those verbs to react to a particular situation. But how will the player choose its verb then? On a big list of verbs, on a more reduced list of verbs chosen by, oh, that's what the whole idea of roles and and options is all about. You have your big list of all the possible verbs that could appear during the story world, but for any given event, there are specific roles, and each of those roles has specific options associated with it. Typically, you only need 2, 3, 4 options for each role. And so that's how you keep it manageable. You know, in a big story world, you could have 100 verbs, and yet most of those verbs are inapplicable to any particular situation. So that's how you keep that under control. Let me get back to your email now. Last question, a more general question. In your system, the story delivered by the engine is driven by the characters and can be described as a succession of events and characters reacting to events, right? Now I think it's a very good way, to handle the actual complexity of telling a story that is not pre-written, but I can't help to think that it would make sense to also handle a system of long-term actions, by which I mean actions that a specific character planned to do at a later moment. Because in most good films, novels, etc., the story is not only a succession of events triggered by a character's reaction to previous events, but also led by events that one or more multiple characters plan to do because it's their goal, so to speak. Could these kind of things be handled by your alarm event system? Yes. However, I will caution you, yes, I built a lot of things into my engine that permit long-term planning. And alarms are one way to do that. Although, again, most alarms are based on events that don't show up in the history book, like somebody entering a stage or somebody acquiring a particular prop. Aha, I now possess the one true ring. I'm gonna go open an ice cream store. But the long-term events can be set with clocked. You have a clock, and at a certain time that triggers. However, that doesn't need to use alarms. You can set that up with a long time delay on the engine. Whatever. In general, I will caution you that the alarm system that I developed is very clever, very powerful, and don't do it. It's not now. It's too much for the moment. Again, I built too much stuff into that engine. And so maybe someday, you know, when you're a master of interactive storytelling technology, you can go in and put an alarm system in. As I said, we have prop alarms, stage alarms, character alarms. There was another kind of alarm too. So these are basically just like interrupts in microprocessor, if you've ever worked with, you know, at the down low at the microprocessor level. Let's see. Okay. Maybe a solution to have interesting endings is to have a good setup for your story world, like your game, Le Mort d'Arthur. You decided at the end it would be which character will fight for you or against you. Yes, you do have to design when you first create your story world. You are going to have to ask yourself, well, you know, what's the goal here? What's supposed to happen? You know, in the barroom brawl. Well, that's pretty obvious. There's going to be a big fight, and some people will run out, and some people will get killed, and some people will be knocked unconscious. But we would expect one person to emerge victorious from all of this. I'm going to digress somewhat and get you a URL. There it is. And whoop, okay. Your homework assignment is to, wait, let me check. Is to watch this video, which is 8 minutes and 49 seconds long, and watch it analytically. It's a comedy based on the classic barroom brawl, but what it does is it takes standard tropes from Western movies and sort of reverses them. And it's absolutely hilarious, but it is also very educational. Wait, there. Very educational about the nature of storytelling. So you'll enjoy that. Let's see. And then finally, Scott, what's, I don't understand your comment here, Blend.
You can skip that. That was just part of my previous conversation. I was trying to come up with an example of that.
Oh, okay.
You know, mysterious force that activated your Hulk powers. So skip it.
Oh, I see. I see.
You know?
Yes, yes.
Because like when I'm teaching or helping people or whatever, you know, I'm just like a machine. But then there are some kids that know my weak spot, and they'll come up, you know, they might talk about my wife or my dog or whatever, and they get a different me that overrides my traits, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. You gave a link to a list of about 20 other story engines in your lesson, and you said that you took this as evidence of failure. So what is the common thread of failure for all those story engines listed? Well, let me look at that. I don't.
It was about halfway down the page
Oh,
of that engine one.
Okay, there we go. Let me go look at that. Oh yes, those. Yeah, those. Most of these are really basically just text adventure tools, or souped up text adventure tools. Let me look at the first one. Boy, I wrote this a long time ago, and so I don't remember. No, I can't remember these things. But again, most of these are, they start with the text adventure as the underlying concept. And then they do variations on that. Now, there are a few that just took a completely different approach. And there was one. Oh, there was one that basically took AI. There was an AI technology developed for goals, path seeking towards a goal. That is, this was developed for proving mathematical theorems. They came up with an AI that could say, all right, we want to prove this. And then it would take it apart, work backwards from there, and then figure out the proof. And then it could say, okay, from here we can prove this, and therefore that, and therefore that, and therefore that, and therefore the conclusion. This was in the late 80s, early 90s that they developed this technology. And so somebody took that idea and said, well, let's do that for storytelling. And it made good stories that feel like mathematical proofs. That's about all. This is what I call this technological opportunism. Gee, I've got this great technology. I wonder if I can use it for storytelling. And there is merit to that. I mean, this technological opportunism sometimes produces fabulous results where somebody says, golly gee, well, in fact, I'll mention one in particular that proved to be very successful. Somebody took the concepts used in building integrated circuits where you have a negative and you beam light through it onto a silicon, and then and that makes a pattern that makes circuits and so forth. They said, I wonder if we could do that for biochemistry. And they came up with this wild scheme where they etch a pattern onto silicon. Only each of these represents a little tiny pool and a little bit of analysis electronics. And then what you can do is go take 1,000 different variations on some chemical, plop them down, and pow! It'll tell you which one works best. That's a good example of technological opportunism. And so occasionally it produces brilliant results, but the vast majority of cases I've seen of technological opportunism have been really, really stupid. I'll give one good example. Somebody had come up with some sensors that could detect, I think it was three of the most important gases or molecules that activate human smell. And so they said, let's put this into games. And they made a device that could plug into your game, into your console, and it could release, sort of an acrid odor. And the idea was then in the game, if you smell the acrid odor, oh, the dragon must be nearby, and so forth. And they were at the game developers conference, and they had the pretty girls dressed up like skunks to, interest people in the thing. And it never went anywhere. It was a really dumb idea. So anyway, there are lots of cases like this. So
was there like a common thread between all of those engines of failure, or was the technology too complex, or what would be?
Well, as I said, most of them are really souped up text adventure generators. That's where most of the stuff has been done. However, there were some others. I'm looking through the list. For example, Facade was really a very simple tree, but its trick was a very clever parser. And you could type anything into that. Let's go get a hamburger, whatever. And it could reduce whatever it was you said to one of 19 verbs. Very clever analysis. But there were only 19 verbs in the whole thing. And then it just responded. It had a simple tree for the 19 verbs. Let's see, ID tension. I remember. No, I don't remember its details. There's thespian. These are things I recognize, and many years ago I knew them. Oh, there was another scheme. The sample story was about walking out of a park and walking by a little cafe, and I can't remember it now. Anyway, the overall conclusion I came to is that none of these, this is all out of the IRIS project. Oop, I believe. Yes, see, this is 9 years old now. The IRIS project, I may have mentioned it earlier, was a project done in the European Union to create a big, let's all get together and do a interactive storytelling project. Let's pool our resources. And there were a lot of interesting things. Basically, there wasn't much pooling. It was more, it ended up being more like a symposium where everybody threw in their own ideas. And a number of interesting ideas came out of it. But the real giveaway here is the fact that in the end, there was no follow-up. That is, the IRIS project, you know, they ran out of funding, and that was the end of that. So I wish I could remember these things. Let me go look at ID tension here. There was also one done by a couple fellows in Paris that was kind of interesting. Yeah. Well, I don't have time to do this, but anyway, I think again, the important conclusion is that of these 20 different technologies that were built, none of them are in use today, which tells us basically that they were all dead ends. The real measure of a technology is, you know, whether people steal it, use its ideas, take it one step further, and so forth. In games, this has gone too far. That is, almost every game you play nowadays is a derivative of a previous game, which was a derivative of a derivative, going back 30 years. It's all derivative. Interactive storytelling is now in the phase where we are flopping around blindly trying to figure out something that will work. And so there are no derivatives at all. In an ideal world, you'll have a few derivatives, but with games, it's all derivatives. And with interactive storytelling, it's no derivatives. You know, we need something in between. So let's see. No. Okay, well, I've caught up with the questions at least, and we still have 15 minutes, but I wanted to go back a little bit to engines. And there's this long list of features to that engine, many of which are, you know, too much. Hijacking the storyline, hidden witnesses, abort capabilities, alarm events. One good thing I did, one element that I will urge upon you is that movement of characters be automatic. Just eliminate the whole, I'm going to go there. The actor, the player should not have to do that, because and I realize that really violates all your expectations. One of the most fundamental decision-making process in almost any game is, where am I going to go? And I argue that that should not play any kind of role in interactive storytelling. Because in fact, in movies, yes, characters are always going places, very common, but they don't really spend any time deciding where to go. They spend their time deciding what to do. And then where to go is just the inevitable consequence of that. So again, this is part of my rant about screw the spatial reasoning. Drama is not about space, it's about people. And so if you're going to have movement between stages, it's best to have it done automatically, where the player simply decides, you know, I need to talk to Mary. And the next thing you know, here you are on the stage where Mary is. And I mean, the alternative would be, well, I'll go to this stage. No, she's not here. I'll go to that stage. No, she's not here either. You're wandering around. And of course, she's moving too. And so you're trying to find her. That's not dramatic. That's just busy work. So just have the algorithms directly take the player to whatever stage he needs to be at to pursue whatever dramatic goals he has. Other points of oh wait, here we have something. In every project I've collaborated on, oh yes, oh God. The writers always wanted to tell their linear story. Did I show you guys the picture of the shark and the tiger? Yeah, that's the problem. The writers want to do it one way, the game designers want to do it another way, and together they just cripple each other. And writers do not understand interactivity, period. I have worked with writers for many years. It takes there are very few who want to do interactive, but do not realize just how much they have to change the way they're thinking. Here's one good way of saying this. In order for a writer to understand interactivity, they have to go through a huge change in their cognitive processing. I'm sure in your own interactions with writers, you've seen, you know, they just don't get interactivity. They just keep doing it wrong. Well, you have to go through the same, a mental cognitive change of similar magnitude to think in terms of processes rather than objects. You know, these are huge mental changes. And so to give you an idea of what you're up against, to shift your style of thinking, what you're up against is very similar to the obstacles they face in comprehending interactivity. Only you're going the next step. They're just trying to get to step one of the basic ideas of interactivity, freedom of choice, lack of control over the final outcome, all of that stuff. And then now I'm trying to push you to the next step where you think in terms of the processes that make interactivity possible. So difficult stuff here. But I think, as you can see, now that we're getting into the specifics, for example, in the options discussion, there was much of the discussion of options centered around that algorithm, very simple algorithm. And yet, I'm sure that, well, let me ask, in terms of, let's express it in terms of time. How many hours would it take you to really understand fully the algorithm I ended up describing in the options lesson? using the blend operator and so forth. If you wanted to understand it well enough to change it to make it better, how many hours of study of that algorithm do you think that would take? Any guesses? Nobody even wants to guess.
10,000.
Okay, it's that hard, huh? Oh dear. Well, that's actually a pretty simple algorithm. Now, I'll admit this blend operator makes it a lot more difficult. But still, this is the kind of thinking that is absolutely necessary for interactive storytelling. Maybe not the blend operator, but I mean, this kind of thinking about how different personality traits combine and how you weight them against each other and so forth. This is what you absolutely must learn to do. And it's hard. But if you can make that transition to thinking in terms of algorithms rather than data structures, then you'll be able to pull this off. Now, let me ask, does that realization make you feel good or bad?
Seems like a challenge.
Okay. Okay, well, again, for the umpteenth time, I'll hit you over the head with the same old thing about how difficult this is and how much time it will take you to undergo this transformation. However, I also want to encourage you by pointing out that if you really do come to understand, well, in fact, right now, I will tell you, with what you guys have learned already, you are way ahead of everybody else. These concepts are just completely lost on the vast majority of people in the gaming community. And if you can master this, you're going to be in a class all by yourself. And I think you'll understand, I think you'll all agree that right now, game design is stuck in a rut. We're just spinning our wheels, doing the same stuff over and over and over again. And there's really been no genuine progress. Most of the progress has been technological, not artistic. Yeah, we're getting faster machines and more pixels and better frame rates and so forth. But we're reaching the top of that now. That is, the stuff we can do right now, increases in speed aren't going to make that much of a difference anymore. We're already fast enough for most stuff. There just aren't that many technological challenges anymore, which means that from this point forward, it's the only way to succeed is to pour more money into it. You know, let's have even more graphics, bigger game, more characters, more planets and so forth. And it's just a matter of money, and creativity has nothing to do with it. This situation has been brewing for more than 20 years now. I was complaining about this 20 years ago. So so there is a desperate need to break out of the rut we're in. And what I'm teaching you is the way to do it. So anyway, oh yeah, good point. If you had a tool to play with, you'd learn a lot faster. Yes, there's been too much theory. And yes, it is time to start getting into some specifics, and that's what I'm going to be working on. But my longer term goal of, you know, maybe 3-4 lessons down the road is to get the encounter editor for you guys, because that's something the technology, I'm sorry, the Storytron technology is just too damned hairy. And so it's not a practical thing. I wonder if we can accelerate this process. Yeah, gossip that can be, and development systems. How about if we do the next three lessons for next week: gossip, development systems, and faces, because those are all, I don't see any of them as major issues. And I'm going to start preparing the encounter editor for you guys. So I think it'd be best if we just jump, rather than build a Toy Story world based around the Storytron technology. I think it will be better if I realign everything around the encounter editor. So I've got a lot of work to do here. Okay, well, let's see. Oh, okay, yeah, I will send you the little exercise I sent to the other group, and you can play with that, and we'll talk about that next week also. So later today, I'll send you an email reminding you of what I'm expecting of you for next week. Okay, any final questions? Okay then, well, we are done, and I will see you guys next week. Oh, wait, no, with a link to the engine, maybe? No, not ready for that yet. Gotta make it plausible. So, okay, I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
See ya.
Bye-bye.